The table was set with imported linens, centerpieces flown in from Napa, and a harpist quietly plucking Moon River in the corner. It was exactly the kind of opulence Daphne Trask preferred, elegant, curated, designed to impress. I paid for all of it, and no one knew. Daphne clinked her third glass of Veuve Clicquot, drawing the room's attention as she rose with a smile that had just started to slip at the edges. I want to thank everyone for coming. Another year older, a few more laugh lines, and hopefully fewer people who think crystals and smoothies count as a career. The guests chuckled awkwardly. Calden reached under the table and squeezed my hand. And of course, she continued a toast to family, old, new, and unconventional. She tilted her glass slightly in my direction. Some women marry up, some buy their way into the family, and some, well, they never really belong, do they? The laughter this time died quickly. The table was set with imported linens, centerpieces flown in from Napa, and a harpist quietly plucking Moon River in the corner. It was exactly the kind of opulence Daphne Trask preferred, elegant, curated, designed to impress. I paid for all of it, and no one knew. Daphne clinked her third glass of Veuve Clicquot, drawing the room's attention as she rose with a smile that had just started to slip at the edges. I want to thank everyone for coming. Another year, older, a few more laugh lines, and hopefully fewer people who think crystals and smoothies count as a career. The guests chuckled awkwardly. Calden reached under the table and squeezed my hand. And of course, she continued a toast to family, old, new, and unconventional. She tilted her glass slightly in my direction. Some women marry up. Some buy their way into the family. And some, well, they never really belong, do they? The laughter this time died quickly. Only the sound of the harpist fumbling a note cut the silence. My fork stayed poised above the plate-grilled sea bass with truffle foam I had sourced from her favorite chef. My chest didn't ache. My cheeks didn't burn. I'd already stopped giving her the power to humiliate me. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. Thanks for the clarity, I said, voice steady, tone polite. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Calden's hand tightened, but I gently slipped free. I walked past the staff I'd hired, past the cake she'd chosen, past the cousin who still called me the yoga girl when he thought I couldn't hear. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Not dramatic, not stormy, just final. Outside, the air smelled like lemon blossoms and something else, something cleaner. I slipped into the waiting car without looking back. I didn't need to. I already knew. In the morning, I'd booked the flight to Palm Springs. But first, I wanted silence and sleep. I never kept a ledger. Not for the favors, not for the money, not for the pieces of myself I handed over like party favors at every family gathering. I gave because that's what I'd always done. That's what I thought love looked like. When Calden graduated and passed the bar, he wanted to celebrate with a trip to Belize. We went to the credit union instead. His parents, Daphne and Lorik, were months behind on their mortgage after the 2008 crash. Their pride wouldn't let them ask outright, but Calden told me the truth. So I wired the payment from a business account that barely had a cushion and told no one but him. Arden's surgery was next. Complications out of network specialists, insurance dragging its feet. I didn't blink, paid the bill. Delivered organic soup to his apartment the next day with a handwritten note that said, "Rest, heal. We've got you." Later that spring, Daphne's SUV broke down. I'd overheard her lamenting about how used cars attract the wrong kind of attention. I ordered her a new one, mid-size ivory leather navigation system. No note, just a bow on the hood. Still at Easter, she called me the yoga girl in front of the cousins. Not Celine, not her son's wife, not the woman who'd quietly erased a 6-figure debt from their lives. At dinners, I brought the flowers, coordinated the caterer, and was still the one asked to refill the wine glasses. When I sat down, Daphne would glance at the empty appetizer platter and say, "Could you check if there's more bruschetta in the kitchen?" She never said thank you, not once. But worse than the silence was the entitlement, like all of it. Everything I gave was owed, and I let it continue. I told myself it was just her way. That old money doesn't clap. that maybe one day she'd come around if I just gave her one more reason to. One more gift, one more olive branch wrapped in grace. So when Calden mentioned a second home in Palm Springs for business retreats, I didn't hesitate. I signed the deed myself, and that villa became my quiet sanctuary long before I ever needed to run to it. The day we crossed the 16 million valuation mark, I was in leggings and a hoodie eating cereal out of a coffee mug on the floor of my office. No confetti, no press release, just the soft ding of an email from my CFO and a quiet moment of disbelief. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Calden. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I knew what would follow if word got out. Daphne would find a way to shrink it, to file it under trendy fluke or lucky timing. I wanted to protect what I'd built from her hands, even if just for a little while longer. But Calden was proud. At dinner the following week, brunch for dinner at the Parkers, because Daphne said it felt fresher, he casually mentioned the milestone between bites of arugula and lemon ricotta pancakes. 16 million, he said, grinning. Can you believe it? Celine started with bath salts in jars, and now she's turning down investors. Daphne didn't even look up from her plate. That internet stuff is always hot, until it's not. She said, stabbing a berry like it had personally offended her. Let's just hope it lasts. Lorik gave a half laugh, the kind that trails behind a comment like a dog that's too tired to bark. Calden didn't notice, or pretended not to. Arden reached for more syrup eyes down. And me, I smiled. I smiled so hard my jaw ached. Inside, something cracked. Not broke, just quietly, precisely fractured. It wasn't the first time she'd dismissed me, but it was the last time I'd let it land. That night, as I cleaned the tiny splash of wine that had dotted my sleeve, I looked at my reflection in their silver frame mirror and saw someone I no longer wanted to keep shrinking for. Someone who was done setting herself on fire to keep others comfortably lukewarm. When we got home, I opened my laptop. Not to check the numbers, they were fine. Instead, I looked up flights to Palm Springs. Just a few clicks, just to see what was available. The suitcase was light. I packed only what I liked wearing, not what might earn approval at someone else's table. Soft cotton linen, one silk dress I hadn't dared wear in front of Daphne. My laptop, my journal, and one photo of Calden and me back when love still felt uncomplicated. I booked the one-way flight just after midnight. The Palm Springs villa was technically listed as a retreat center, but I'd always known it was my exit strategy. I just hadn't realized how much I needed it until the silence in our bedroom felt heavier than any argument. Calden had fallen asleep with the TV on reruns of something forgettable humming in the background. I watched him for a while, his mouth slightly open, a hand curled against his chest. He looked peaceful, but I couldn't shake the truth. I was no longer at peace here. At the kitchen counter, I wrote the note. No drama, no begging, just the truth. Calden. Supporting you doesn't mean erasing myself. I love you, but I need space to hear my own voice again. Please don't come after me right away. Celine. I left it beside his keys. As the driver helped me with my bag, I took one last look at our house. The home I designed down to the fireplace tile that Daphne once called quaint. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel righteous. I felt clear. At the airport, I turned off my phone before boarding. No buzzing, no last-minute guilt, just the smooth slide of the plane lifting off the runway, leaving behind the version of me that said yes. Too often smiled too tightly, gave too much. By the time Calden would read the note, I'd be halfway across the country sipping citrus water on a shaded terrace, with my feet in warm sand and nothing pressing on my chest but the quiet. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. The first week I slept, not out of sadness, but out of sheer release. No alarms, no conference calls, no bracing for someone's passive dig over brunch. Just the rhythm of my breath syncing with the sound of wind pushing through palms. I didn't check my phone, though I knew the messages were there. Missed calls from Calden. A few texts from Arden, more neutral than probing. A delivery alert for a fruit basket that showed up without a name or card. The signature scent of Daphne's effort, expensive and empty. I journaled every morning. It was clumsy at first, like learning to speak a language I hadn't used in years. What do you say when no one's grading your piece or misinterpreting your silence? By week 2, I'd started sketching out a new branch of Trask, living a mentorship program for first-generation women, building businesses without pedigree or capital. I called it Quiet Fire. The name felt like me. I held the strategy meetings barefoot, camera off, voice clear. The team adjusted seamlessly. Turns out, when you stop trying to hold everyone's hand, they find their own grip. In the evenings, I walked the edge of the pool watching dusk bleed into starlight. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just noticed how light softened on stucco, how freedom has a texture. Calden's voicemails came daily. They started tender-turned, pleading, then uncertain. "I miss you," he said once, his voice brittle. "Everything's out of rhythm without you." But still, I said nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because for the first time I needed to be the only voice in the room. No one interpreting my silence as a threat. No one asking me to soften when I was already spent. 3 months passed like that. Not running, not waiting, just rebuilding quietly on my own terms. And then one afternoon, as I was pouring iced tea and planning my next virtual launch, the doorbell rang. It was Calden at the door holding a duffel bag and a face that looked older than 3 months ago. The sun caught the edges of his hair, and for a second, I didn't move. I just watched him, unsure if I was relieved or tired. "I didn't call," he said, voice soft. "I figured you'd hang up." He wasn't wrong. He set his bag down and asked for water, like a man who hadn't had a real drink in weeks. As we sat on the terrace, he started talking, not to explain, just to tell the truth. The law firm downsized. His team was gutted, and he barely held on. Daphne asked him to cover the renovation of the guest house so she could finally rent it out properly. Arden's startup folded after I didn't promote the launch. He never said it, Calden admitted, but I saw it in his face. "You were the engine behind all of it." I didn't speak, just nodded once and waited. "I thought I was the one holding things together," he said, quieter now. "Turns out I was just the one people expected to." He looked around the villa like it was a country he didn't deserve a passport to. "You built this Celine, and I let them make you feel like an outsider in your own story. It wasn't apology I wanted, it was clarity. And now I could see he was finally starting to find it." We spent the rest of the evening in cautious orbit, side by side, not quite touching. He slept in the guest room without asking. The next morning, I made 2 coffees and watched him walk barefoot into the kitchen like he was afraid to make noise. He hadn't brought up going home yet, and neither had I, but something in his eyes had shifted. Not fear, not guilt. Something else. He sat down across from me, hands wrapped around the mug I handed him, and said, "If you'll let me, I'd like to stay a little longer." We sat in the garden after dinner, the same garden I had watched bloom without anyone asking how I liked things to grow. Calden leaned back in the teak chair, his face open, hopeful, like he thought being here was the fix. But being present isn't the same as being awake. I've been thinking, he started cautious about what it looks like to go home together. I took a slow sip from my glass, watching a moth dance near the citronella flame. "Home," I asked gently, "or your mother's house?" His expression faltered. "I mean our house. Michigan. Our life." I shook my head once, not cruel, just final. "Not until you stop being her son first." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I didn't press. "I'm not asking you to choose between us. I'm asking you to stop letting her choose for you," I said. "I've spent years making myself small to protect your peace. What I need now is a partner who protects mine." He nodded, but I wasn't done. "I love you, but I won't walk back into a house where I'm expected to absorb every insult quietly. I won't be the emotional shield you hide behind. I never meant for you to be," he said the words thick with regret. But I replied. You saw it. You let it go because it kept the water still. And I kept letting you because I thought that was love. He looked down at his hands, rubbed his thumb along the ring he hadn't taken off since I left. I want to be better. Then be different, I said. He looked up at me, and for the first time there was no argument in his eyes, only understanding. I'm not saying never, I added quietly. But the return doesn't start in that house. It starts with boundaries, real ones. He nodded again, slower this time, like the weight of the truth had finally settled. And when the phone rang the next morning with her name on the screen, I watched him turn it over and let it go to voicemail. We started therapy on a Thursday. Calden sat in the guest room with his laptop propped on a pillow, and I stayed out on the lanai with my earbuds in. We didn't speak much before or after those first few sessions, but something shifted. Not in volume, but in clarity. He stopped defending her, stopped explaining the way she was raised or how she meant well in her own way. He started seeing how years of silence had become its own permission slip. She made it easy for me, he admitted once, to be passive, to let you carry the emotional weight because I was too afraid of being the bad son. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, letting him sit in the realization. 2 weeks into the sessions, Daphne sent an email. It began with, "I'm sorry if I made you feel," and ended with a list of ways she'd felt excluded since I left. She mentioned how the family had struggled emotionally and how it would mean a lot if we could move forward. I read it twice, then deleted it. I didn't forward it to Calden. I didn't reply. But I did send one message back typed slowly, intentionally. Daphne, I wish you well. But I'm no longer available to translate half apologies or carry guilt I didn't earn. I'm not your wallet. I'm not your scapegoat. I'm your son's wife, and I deserve respect, not tolerance. If that's not something you can offer freely, I'll be keeping my distance. Celine. I didn't expect a response, and none came. That silence, unlike the one I'd clung to in the beginning, felt clean. Calden didn't argue. Instead, he asked if we could schedule one of our therapy sessions just for him. That night, I overheard him telling the therapist, "I'm not trying to change her mind. I'm trying to change the pattern that let this happen." After he closed the laptop, he sat beside me, both of us quiet beneath the fading light. "I'm proud of you," I said. He turned to me, eyes tired but clear. "I want to keep earning that." We stood barefoot on the patio, the sun slipping behind the cliffs, casting everything in gold. There was no minister, no audience, just the two of us and the truth we'd clawed our way back to. "I choose you," Calden said, voice steady, "not because it's easy, but because I finally know what choosing really means." I didn't cry, not this time. I looked at the man who had learned to listen without defense and said, "I choose myself first. And because of that, I can choose you again." We exchanged simple bands etched only with the date. Not the day we married, but the day I left. The day everything finally changed. We didn't move back to Michigan. We opened a second office for Trask Living in Santa Barbara, a space filled with plants and glass and music. The company grew in new directions. So did I. Daphne came to visit once. Not for long, just a weekend with Lorik. She was different, quieter. No sharp jabs, no veiled remarks. Just a woman aware of her own fading influence, and maybe for the first time unsure of her place in the world I'd built without her. At dinner, she looked around the villa, her voice thinner than usual. "It's beautiful here. You've done well for yourself." It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't venom either. "Thank you," I said, folding my napkin calmly. "But I never needed your approval." She looked startled. "I just needed my peace." She didn't argue. She nodded once and took a sip of her wine. After they left, Calden walked into the kitchen and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You're not just building something here," he said. "You're becoming someone she'll never be able to define again." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The wind moved through the trees. The house glowed with the kind of light you can only earn through fire. And in that stillness, I felt it not revenge, not triumph, something better, something final, freedom.